What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Titletown Talk. I'm your host, Ian Ewing, and today we are going to preview the NFL season opener against the Detroit Lions this Sunday. I can't believe it's already here, folks. But before we do that, I want to start the podcast by going over, briefly, probably the biggest trade in Packers history that happened last Thursday. Your Green Bay Packers, who are, quote, always in on every conversation, but actually never finished the deal. They land the best pass rusher in the NFL, in my opinion, and in my opinion, the best defensive player in the league, especially when you consider the versatility to an already really exciting young defense. The Packers trade their first-round pick in 2026 and 2027, along with defensive tackle Kenny Clark, to the Cowboys for Micah frickin' Parsons. Guys, they actually did it. We're about a week out from this trade happening. Today is Thursday, September 4th. I still can't believe it. When I woke up Friday morning, I literally thought I was dreaming. These are the types of things that as Packer fans that we all just kind of wish that they would do, and they never do, for, better or for worse, right? Sometimes it ends up being a good thing that they didn't make the deal. But I genuinely didn't expect this to happen. I thought there was a chance. We talked about it on the last podcast episode. But they freaking did it. They did it. Micah Parsons is a Green Bay Packer. He's wearing number 1, which is the first time anyone's donned that number since Curly Lambeau back in the 20s or whatever it was. So again, it's not an officially retired number, but nobody's worn it for a long, long time. So I wanted to do a full episode on the trade. I started to type up notes for an episode, and I really just couldn't get my thoughts into like an organized format. I just kept, starting and stopping and adding this and taking out that and all that stuff. It was mostly due to just an uncontrollable amount of excitement, as you probably would understand. Look, this podcast, let's call it what it is. I really enjoy doing it. I don't do it for a living. I don't do it for a following. I just do it for the 10 to 20 of you that download it every week, or maybe the more of you that listen. I didn't want to add any sort of stress, quote unquote, to creating an episode about the trade. I just wanted to be a fan, soak it in, and that was it. I listened to probably 5 hours worth of Micah Parsons trade coverage when I was moving this last weekend, and I still can't get enough of it, right? When they made the trade, I was down in the parking garage of my old apartment, unpacking our storage closet. I had told my wife on Tuesday, because remember Tuesday, Ricky Leaks or Ricky Scoops, the dog pictured Twitter account, the insider that is definitely an insider, he had said on Tuesday last week that, the Packers had an offer on the table to Micah Parsons. The deal was contingent on Micah agreeing to the contract. They had already figured out the compensation with the Cowboys. So again, this was starting to heat up. I still didn't really think that it was going to happen. But I did tweet on Tuesday. If you guys don't follow me on Twitter, it's at Ian Ewing 227. I tweeted out that I thought that if this was actually going to happen and there were actually legs to this trade, that the next day, aka Wednesday, we would hear from Rappaport or Schefter or Albert Breer or whoever that the Cowboys are now open to trading Micah Parsons. And that would be our indicator that this was indeed going to happen. It didn't happen on Wednesday like I predicted, but it did happen on Thursday. We got the report from, I believe it was Schefter, who said the Cowboys are now listening to offers, which is exactly what I thought would happen. And then later on that afternoon, when I was in the parking garage, my cousin texted me, and I never get service in the parking garage, by the way. And just randomly I did this time. My cousin Lavin texted me. I freaked out. I ran upstairs, screamed. Again, I told my wife that if this happened, that I would go postal, I would go nuclear, all the words, and I did. I'm sure all of you did as well. I'll just end this topic by saying this vaulted the Packers from, what I would consider fringe contenders, right? They were fringe contenders that had to rely on growth from second, third, fourth year players, right? A lot of things had to go right for them to get there, right? Jordan Love had to be the 2023 second half version, which I think he will be. And we had to see Rashawn Gary return to his 2021 form. We had to see Lucas Van Ness turn into a real contributor. We had to see the corner step, all this stuff, right? There were so many contingencies for them to be a Super Bowl team. Now, I had said in the Bold Predictions episode that I think a lot of these things are and were going to happen, right? But this trade essentially made them a real contender to go to the Super Bowl and win it, right? Micah Parsons is a needle mover, unlike, in my opinion, any other defensive player in the league. right? Peter Bukowski, who does Locked on Packers, another podcast, he had said yesterday, and I totally agree with this, by the way, that if you asked Goody, hey, you could trade for one player in the NFL, any player you wanted, all you had to give up was whatever compensation, right? Who would you trade for? I guarantee you he would have said Micah Parsons. Maybe Jamar Chase, right? I love Jamar Chase. But my point being is this is a real deal, like best possible outcome trade, and they got him for what I would consider pennies, right? Obviously, Kenny Clark, thank you for your service. Giving up Kenny Clark was tough, right? He was the final draft pick of Ted Thompson's when he was here. Kenny's been in the league since he was 20 years old. He's played almost 10 years in the league. I think it's 9 this year. He's always been a really underrated player. He's never really gotten the credit he deserves, even amongst Packer fans, right? Because he doesn't have the flashy numbers. So losing him, that's difficult, right? But Goody said it in the press conference. They've been wanting to give more snaps to Colby Wooden, Carl Brooks, Warren Brinson, and Nazir Stackhouse, the rookies as well. And this is going to allow them to do that. I will just end this topic by saying when they hired Jeff Hafley and he did his press conference, one thing he said that really stuck out to me was he didn't really think stopping the run had to be like this big nose tackle like it was, for years before this. He wanted to get upfield, shoot gaps, penetrate, and, essentially stop the run on the way to the quarterback, right? Kenny's not that guy. That's more of like, so what he's essentially saying is I'm going to play a bunch of 3 techniques at defensive tackle, and that is going to be what's going to get us the run stopping that we need. I think now, and again, Kenny Clark's going to be a big loss, right? They're going to have to overcompensate for him with really good play from Cooper and Walker at linebacker. LVN and Rashawn Gary are going to have to step up as run defenders like they did last year, right? But this is going to allow them to play more in line with what Hafley wanted to do, right? Anyway, I just wanted to add that part. Like I said earlier, this is the biggest and most franchise-altering trade in our history. I know we can talk about Brett Favre, but when they traded for Brett Favre, they didn't know that he was going to be Brett Favre, right? That's been documented many times. Brett Favre was not good when they traded for him. Now, again, it was massively well done by Ron Wolf and company when they did do it, but this was not somebody who had already established himself, right? I just want to tip the cap to Gutekunst real quick, Brian Gutekunst, he's been trying to acquire a big-time player like this, despite all what the haters say. He's got a lot of haters, which I don't understand. The people who hate Gutekunst, and you can have criticisms of him, I have plenty. But saying that he should be fired or he's on the hot seat is just ridiculous. It proves you don't really know how the NFL works. No offense. This is a lot of credit goes to him, right? We've already talked about this. I mentioned it on the Myles Garrett episode back when I did that. I think it was back in March. When Khalil Mack got traded in 2018, the Packers and the Bears were the final 2 teams in the bidding. They had the same exact offers on the table, the same exact offers to Khalil Mack. The only reason the Raiders picked the Bears was because they felt the Bears would be the worst team, which would yield better draft picks in the trade. They ended up being wrong, which is kind of ironic. The Bears were better than the Packers in 2018. So again, he's proven that if it's the right player, he will go for it. And I think that, Myles Garrett was never on the table, by the way. I don't think Max Crosby was either. Micah Parsons was. And I believe it was Rob Demovsky of ESPN asked Goody about this. Like, hey, what did you learn from the Khalil Mack thing? He said, well, I realized that I needed to get in earlier than I did. And he admitted that he got in very early with the Cowboys. My expectation is he probably called them back when Micah sent out the iPhone note saying that he wanted to be traded. So again, I just have to give massive kudos to Goody in this. We have watched this team completely transform from the year 2022 to 2025. And he's done it through the draft. He's done it through smart free agency signings. He's done it through trades. He's done an incredible job of building this roster. And now they just have to go out and prove it this year, right? So just wanted to tip my cap to him really quick. That's all I'm going to say on Micah Parsons. Obviously, the biggest winner in this trade is, the Packers defense as a whole, but this is going to make Rashawn Gary, who was getting double teamed at a ridiculously high rate and chipped at a ridiculously high rate for the last couple of years, it's going to give him one-on-ones all day because you can't leave Micah Parsons one-on-one for 95% of offensive tackles, probably with the exception of this weekend with Penei Sewell and maybe against the Eagles with Lane Johnson, but I digress. this is a massive trade, massive win for the Packers. They fleeced the Cowboys. I cannot believe they only had to give up 2 first-round picks for that. Because, again, I think Micah Parsons is better than Khalil Mack was. I know Khalil Mack had the Defensive Player of the Year when he was traded, but, again, just massive credit to the Packers on this. Now, let's get to the Lions versus the Packers. The season opener here this weekend on September 8th, 7th, whatever day it is. The Lions, obviously, they're coming off of a 15-win season. They were the number 1 seed in the NFC. They were the number 1 offense in the NFL last season. It wasn't even close, by the way. They don't get a lot of credit on defense last year, despite, losing a ton of starters last year. They ended up being 7th in the league in points allowed. I believe they were 20th in yards allowed. So again, they did give up some yardage. Granted, it's because they're ahead in all these games, right? So the other team has to pass in garbage time. So there's context, right? They did all that last year without Aiden Hutchinson, which in my opinion, Aiden Hutchinson's the best pure pass rusher in the NFL. Him and Micah Parsons are probably 1, 2. I would put them at 1 and 2. You can flip-flop them if you want. I'd put Myles Garrett at 3, and then we can sort of chat about the others after that. In terms of the players they added in the offseason, they really kind of just focused on the draft. They lost a few players in free agency that are notable, right? They lost Carlton Davis, the cornerback, but they were able to replace him with DJ Reed, who played for the Jets last year. I thought the Packers would have some interest in him in the offseason. They probably did. The Lions probably just outbid them. So anyway, I do say they had a pretty good draft, right? In the first round, they took Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle from Ohio State. In the first round, they took Tate Ratledge, the guard out of Georgia, in the second. And in the third, they made what I would call a shocking pick and took wide receiver Isaac Tesla out of Arkansas. And he was a guy we talked about on the Packers preview. All 3 of the players that the Lions picked, by the way, were people that we talked about in all of our draft previews. So I know the players well. I do think that they had a pretty good draft. I do think they reached for Tesla a little bit, despite his really strong preseason. The biggest loss, though, was their center, Frank Ragnow, who announced his retirement a few months back. This is a massive loss for the Lions. He's probably, in my opinion, their best offensive lineman, outside of Sewell, of course. And, again, what he was able to do against the Packers, especially in that first game and even in the second game, right? The Packers could not get pressure with 4 last year, hence the trade for Micah Parsons, right? They had to send a lot of pressure up the middle. They blitzed Quay Walker. They blitzed Edgerrin Cooper. They blitzed Isaiah McDuffie. They blitzed the safeties. They did all kinds of stuff, right? One of the biggest reasons the Lions were able to prevent that from hurting them last year was because of Frank Ragnow. So I think this is a massive loss, right? Tate Ratledge is going to be the starting guard for them. Their center, I believe, is Graham Glasgow. I think that's his name. Yeah, not a scary player whatsoever. Tate Ratledge is a rookie at guard, and then they have Christian Mahogany at the other guard position, right? Tyleik Williams is going to be starting a defensive tackle for them, and I think Isaac Tesla is going to get real snaps at their third wide receiver. I think Khalif Raymond may out-snap him a little bit, but we will see when the time comes. So the biggest losses on the team, though, everybody's been talking about it overall, is losing Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, to the Bears, RIP, and their defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, who's now the head coach of the New York Jets. And I think he did an admirable job last year, basically deploying Burger King workers on defense, for lack of a better term, to overcompensate for the injuries, right? So it's a bittersweet thing, right? We're taking on 2 new coordinators in week 1, right? The good news is, right, there is probably going to be some growing pains with both Goff and on the defensive side with their new defensive coordinator. The bad part is we don't really have any tape on them. Now, both of these guys were in the building last year. I think Morton was in the building, their offensive coordinator. I could be wrong on that. So even if he wasn't, right, they're probably going to have some unscouted looks that are going to be a bit scary for the Packers. So there might be some plays that, the Packers aren't expecting, right? So I think the goal for the Packers is get them out of their scripted stuff, right? If you guys don't know this, in the NFL, right, teams basically get the first 20 plays scripted, no matter what happens, no matter how it goes, very rarely even the situations, right? They run a scripted 20 plays or so, 15 to 20 plays at the beginning of the game, right? And those are oftentimes the ones where, you're not expecting those. Those are the creative play calls we see. Those are typically in the scripted stuff, right? Getting ahead of the team forces that team out of the scripted stuff and having to ad-lib a bit more. And this is where if the Packers can get ahead, they're going to force the Lions to get out of the scripted stuff, and they're going to have to rely more on, cans and audibles and stuff like that will get them into stuff they're comfortable with, right? I think that obviously that will get them out of the running game too. The Lions' strength is running the ball. We can sit here and talk about everything else on the team. Their biggest strength is having Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. So let's talk about the Packers' keys on offense. So what do the Packers need to do on offense in order to beat the Lions? Key number 1, stop Aiden Hutchinson at all costs. Okay. Last season, Hutchinson broke his leg severely, by the way. I cannot believe he's back, by the way. Crazy. I mean, this is a really, really significant, severe leg injury that he had, and he's back. And, reportedly, again, they're always going to say this, right, that he's looking incredible in camp. They had a really consistent pass rush last season. Look no further than the first half of the second Lions game in Detroit last year against the Packers. They were swallowing Jordan Love. There was some terrible play by Josh Myers in that game. See ya. I think, Rasheed Walker had a bad game there. I think we're going to, we can look at a few other guys who didn't play well. But, Aaron Glenn was doing a really good job of getting pressure despite not having Aiden Hutchinson. They also were able to bring in Zadarius Smith, who I'm actually surprised they never brought him back this season. I wonder if he's just more of a cancer in the locker room than we even think he is. And believe me, there's a lot of Packer fans, including myself, who think he's a cancer. Outside of Hutchinson, though, I don't have anybody on that defensive front that I'm scared of, right? They have Levi Muzurike and Aleem McNeil. They're their defensive tackles. They're definitely good at getting pass rush on the interior. They're both hurt. They're both out. So that means it's going to be Tyleik Williams and DJ Reader on the interior, rushing the passer and trying to stop the run. To me, neither of them strike any sort of fear from that pass rush standpoint. Reader had a 64 pass rush grade from PFF in 2024. And obviously Tyleik Williams was a rookie playing at Ohio State last year. He had a 61 pass rush grade, so barely above average for those two. Again, 60 is average. Neither of them are any sort of concern to me from a pass rushing standpoint. That leaves Marcus Davenport on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. Marcus Davenport, former first-round pick. He's famously the guy who the Saints took when they traded up with the Packers in 2018. Yeah, 2018. So he's been in the league for a while. He hasn't played a full season since 2022. And in that season, he played for the Vikings, ironically. Last season, when he did play, he played, I believe, in 2 games. He had a 12% pass rush win rate, which is not good. For perspective, guys, Micah Parsons was like 20. So that doesn't sound like a massive difference, but it's a massive difference. When he did play last year, he had a 51 PFF grade, so below average. Marcus Davenport's never had over 6 sacks in a season. And the season he did have 6, it was back in 2019. So I don't think anybody on that team, aside from Aiden Hutchinson, is going to scare me from a pass rush standpoint. So if they can protect Jordan and they can give Jordan time, I think he's going to have a lot of time. I think he's going to do well, right? They just have to slow down Aiden Hutchinson. We're going to see a lot of Hutchinson on Zach Tom. I like that matchup for the Packers, even in a one-on-one. I think Zach Tom is a top 3 right tackle in the game, top 5 at worst. When they're going one-on-one against each other, I think that's probably a net win for the Lions, right? But Zach Tom's going to win his fair share as well. So again, you can slide some protection over there. You can chip him. You don't have to worry about anybody else on that defensive line for the Lions. Now they do have some linebackers. We'll get to them in a minute, who they do send on a lot of blitzes. So you are going to have to be ready to pick up the blitz. Josh Jacobs, make sure you're ready. I think we're going to see a heavy dose of Chris Brooks in this game, the Packers running back, number 30, if you don't know who I'm talking about. They're going to need to slow down the blitz because I think they're going to send a lot of pressure in this game. And it should be what I would consider exotic pressure because we have never seen Kelvin Benjamin, or I forget what his name is, their defensive coordinator. We haven't seen him. So ultimately, I think they'll be able to slow them down enough in this first game back. Since that gruesome injury last season, I think they're going to be able to slow down Aiden Hutchinson enough. The Lions pass rush, again, it's completely dependent on Hutchinson having a good game. I think he's an elite pass rusher, but again, he was hurt last season. He had a major injury. I think he's going to be a little bit rusty in this game. I really like their chances. If they can protect Jordan Love in this game, they can keep Aiden Hutchinson off balance. They can at least keep him from wrecking the game, force the Lions to blitz, and then have some stuff ready and teed up for when they do. And I think they're going to do really, really well. Key number 2, run the ball even if it's not effective to set up play action. I talked about this at length in the first podcast I've ever done back in February when I reviewed the season. The Packers did not use play action near as much as they did in 2023, despite having a better run game. They had a better run game in 2024. It's indisputable. I know everybody loves Aaron Jones, myself included, but Josh Jacobs was better than Aaron Jones was in 2023. Their play action percentage was 26% in 2023. It went down to 21% in 2024, which, again, doesn't sound like a lot of difference. But the big difference, and this isn't figured into this, is they did not do a lot of I formation, Jordan under center play action. It was very much a shotgun-centric play action game, which is never as effective as running it out of I formation or single back, right? So I do think that, last year there's reasons for that. Jordan was hurt. That knee injury, kind of bending over and taking a snap under the center, can be a bit tough on him. I think that the thumb shouldn't be too limiting, but I do think they might have an issue with play action a little bit, handing it off. They might want to give him a few weeks before they do that. But the key in having a better run game this year was getting rid of Josh Myers. They essentially subbed out Elton Jenkins for Josh Myers, and then they added Aaron Banks. So they have a much better interior center guard combination than they've ever had in the LaFleur era, in my opinion. Now, granted, I think they were better when they had Corey Linsley back in 2020, but I digress. Josh Myers had a really, really, really bad season last year. Run blocking, he's never really been too good. So I do think we're going to see a lot better and more efficient run game. I know the Packers, they drafted Matthew Golden. They gave Jordan the big extension last season. The passing game is fun. Everybody's excited about these receivers and tight ends, myself included. But I think this could be the best running game that they've had in a long, long time. I don't know if I would go back as far as Amon Green and Najee Davenport, Tony Fisher, all them in the 03, 04 years, right? But this is it's going to be a really good run game this year. And I think the Packers need to take advantage of the Lions, weaknesses up the middle. I would just run at Aiden Hutchinson all game. And I would, even if it's not working, you just keep pounding the rock. 2-3 yards there, maybe 4 yards there, maybe 1 yard. But you just keep pounding it, and you diversify your attack, and you make sure that the Lions never know what's coming. I do love the Lions linebackers. I do think they're a pretty big threat in the run game. From a matchup standpoint, they have Alex Anzalone. They have Jack Campbell, who I think is a future All-Pro. He might have even been an All-Pro last year. I could be wrong on that. It's a fun linebacker room. Anzalone's 30 years old, though. So, again, do some toss plays, make him chase you down. I do think that their defensive line is one you can run on. I don't think they will be in the long run. I think Tyleik Williams is a really good player. And Wuzurike and Aleem McNeil are really good players. They're all hurt, right? So again, establish the run early. Even if it's 2-3 yards a carry, mix in the running backs. Don't let anybody get too tired. I think that's going to open up the pass game a lot. If they get ahead early, they can use the run game to put them away too. Key number 3, again, give Jordan time to throw, but we need to have a plan against man coverage. The strength of this Lions team is their defensive backs. It just is. They have 2 All-Pro safeties, Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch. I love Tyrion Arnold coming out of Alabama. I was a big fan of his. If I had been doing draft content last year, I would have probably spent an entire episode on him. He was easily taken advantage of last year. He had a lot of penalties last year. He was one of the most penalized corners in the league last year. He's definitely more of a zone corner, but I do think that he can play man. He's got a lot of length, long arms. He's tall. He's athletic. But DJ Reed, who they signed in free agency again, he's a really, really good man corner. So I do think that they're going to go out and, again, you saw it last year, guys. The games that the Packers struggled the worst, it was against the Lions and against the Vikings. They play a ton of man coverage. They were able to throw the receivers off the spot. I think it got in their head a little bit. I think they're going to do that again this year. Amik Robinson is their slot corner. If you guys remember the Week 17 game or 18 or whatever it was, when the Vikings and Lions played for essentially the division title and the number 1 seed, Amik Robertson covered Justin Jefferson for a large majority of that game, and he absolutely locked him down, just like Jair did back in 2022. Massive game from Amik Robertson against Justin Jefferson. So he's a really capable slot corner. So I think the Lions are going to play man coverage. They're going to jam the Packers receivers. They're going to get them off their spot. When we saw them do all those drops last year, they had a lot of the miscommunications and misalignment on routes, all that stuff. It was usually against those teams that played a lot of man, right? This can't happen in 2025. I do think that they're a bit more uniquely set up to beat man coverage this year. I think you heard about Tucker Kraft in the offseason. He practiced his route running to beat man coverage. I think Matthew Golden, you really can't bump the dude because if you miss, he's going to beat you deep. Dontavian Wicks, when he's on his game, he missed a lot of camp, right? I do think we're going to see the best version of him in this game and this season. His best strength is route running. Beating man-to-man coverage is something he can do with regularity, right? LaFleur has to be malleable in this game. If they play more man coverage than he anticipates, they need to be quick to react. This happened in the Vikings game last year. After the game, LaFleur was asked about it. He said, yeah, they played a lot more man coverage than we thought they would. Okay, well, what was your plan to counter it? I love LaFleur. I think he's a brilliant offensive mind. He's a great head coach. But one thing that he's very stubborn. And when he has a game plan, it's very hard for him to get out of it, even if it's not working. So I do think he needs to have a plan here in case this does happen, and have some mesh concepts, some stuff with some double moves, right? Have plans for that man coverage because it's coming. If they can keep Jordan clean, give him a chance to diagnose the field, go through his reads. No matter what coverage they're playing, if you got time to throw, you're going to be able to beat it. So again, give him time to throw and look for ways to beat man coverage. If you do that, you're going to be really, really set up in this game. Another advantage the Packers have, right? You hear all the time about they don't have a number one and blah, 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 all that stuff. When you have 5 guys, which they do, they go 5 deep, who are basically 2s and 3s in other teams, you're going to get a receiver on a linebacker or a receiver on a safety or their 4th or 5th string cornerback, right? When you spread out the receivers. Spread them out, win the one-on-one, scheme them open, whatever you got to do, find the best matchup. As much as I love Brian Branch, if he's one-on-one with Matthew Golden, I think Matthew Golden's going to beat him. So again, Luke Musgrave is another excellent chess piece, right? Get Luke Musgrave on a linebacker or one of those safeties where he's 5 inches taller than them, and find your matchups and slay them with those matchups, right? Okay, that's the keys in offense. Let's go to the keys on defense. Again, you guys will probably not just listen to this show. If you do, man, I appreciate it, right? But you're going to hear it all this week. If you pressure Jared Goff, you can beat him. It's been the case since he was on the Rams. If you give him time to throw, he's going to dice you up, and he did that with regularity last season. Since he's been the Lions quarterback, he's had really, really good protection up front. You got Penei Sewell and Taylor Decker at tackle, and they're about as reliable as you can find. But, again, we talked about Frank Ragnow retiring. They have a rookie in Tate Ratledge playing guard. Christian Mahogany is not a good guard. And Graham Glasgow, the center, is very unproven. He's not been good when he's played. So the key on this game to me, key number 1, most important, pressure Jared Goff, but do it up the middle. Jared Goff can't run, despite the fact that he had a touchdown catch last year, which was pretty funny. Get pressure up the middle, make him rush outside, get outside the pocket, and then you send the demon, Micah Parsons, after him, right? Again, Rashawn Gary, Micah Parsons, in my opinion, that's the most dangerous edge duo in the whole league. Maybe you could argue Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. I think Danielle Hunter is a little bit old. I think he's going to take a bit of a step back this season. I love Brian Branch and Abdul Carter on the Giants. There's definitely some good ones out there, but I think these two are the best. I mentioned it earlier, right? The win in this Parsons trade is Rashawn Gary. He gets double teamed all the time, chipped all the time. He just hasn't had anyone across from him that can be scary, right? Think about it. LVN last year, terrible at pass rush. Preston Smith, before they traded him last year, was a complete non-factor. Kingsley Enagbare, who I think had a really good camp this year, he was coming off that knee injury. He never really looked the same last season. So if you're the opposing offensive line, what do? The only guy who can beat you is Rashawn Gary. So chip him, double team him, whatever. And that they did that. In 2021, when Rashawn Gary had his 83 pressures and all that stuff, he had, prime Preston Smith on the other side. They had a prime Kenny Clark on the inside, right? He was not their only threat. And when he was able to eat against one-on-ones, he won them. And I think he's a better player now than he was in 2021. So I think that we're going to see Parsons and Gary. Now, Parsons is probably only going to play 40, 50 snaps at most. But it's going to be at the most important times. So again, I think they can win against Sewell and Decker on the outside. But if it's me, I'm going to send Micah Parsons and Gary and LVN up the middle at those guards. Those guards are not good players. They're just not. Now, maybe they prove us wrong this season, but as far as what we know about them now, this is a place you can attack with regularity. So I would be sending pressure up the middle. With Micah, I would be sending LVN up the middle, make him stand up over the guard, do like a wide set against the guards, and just beat the hell out of them. Now, this also means Devontae Wyatt needs to have a good game here, right? He's been inconsistent as a run defender since he's been in the league, but he's been consistently good at getting pressure. Now, you might say, Ian, doesn't have a lot of sacks, right? Well, that's true. And it's because the dude hasn't been able to finish, right? But in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback up the middle, he's been pretty consistently good since they drafted him. So he just got his 5th-year option picked up. I expect him to have a really, really good season. They're going to rely on him to be really good after they traded Kenny Clark. I think he's going to eat in this game. It's a massive advantage. Even if Parsons doesn't rush up the middle, which I think he will, you got to feel good about Devontae Wyatt on those guards, especially the rookie. Colby Wooden, again, showed some pass rush juice in the past. He had a pretty good camp. He put on some weight. Carl Brooks specifically is somebody I'm excited for this season. In 2023, his rookie season, he had a really good year getting pressure. Definitely slowed down last year. I'm wondering if he might have had an injury or maybe he just didn't get enough snaps to get into a rhythm. That happens too. But that 2023 game, the Thanksgiving game where the Packers beat the Lions, Carl Brooks had a sack on Goff, had like 5 pressures, forced a fumble. So I do like the chances getting pressure up the middle. Key number 2, stop the run. Make them throw the ball. Again, this is probably pretty obvious. They have in my opinion, a top 3 back in the whole league in Jahmyr Gibbs and probably the best number 2, arguably, in David Montgomery. They call him Sonic and Knuckles in Detroit, which is super cringe, by the way. When they played the Lions last season, Edgerrin Cooper hadn't quite reached his peak yet. I think this game we're going to see, again, prime Edgerrin Cooper, or better Edgerrin Cooper, right? The Cooper we saw at the end of last season. And the key is if we see the same Quay Walker that we saw in the middle of last season, this could be a really, really scary duo. Now, they need to be on their game in this game as, to put it plainly, they are going to be massively important in this game. And from a run-stopping standpoint, yes, but also in play action covering those tight ends, Sam Laporta specifically. We're going to see the Lions, their game plan is going to be simple. They're going to run the ball at Micah Parsons and and Rashawn Gary. They're going to run the ball, and then they're going to play action off of it. They're going to do it all game. So that means Quay and Edgerrin Cooper, they got to be smart. They got to make sure they're on their assignments in this game. Both have shown flashes of being really good coverage linebackers as well. We need to see it. We've seen the good Quay Walker in spurts. I think he can be the best second linebacker in the league. This duo can be the best if he plays the way he did in stretches last season. Quick key to think about here. Isaiah McDuffie in coverage. He's the Packers' 3rd linebacker. They extended him in the offseason. I don't know why, by the way. In my opinion, he is the biggest liability in coverage on the whole team. So I do think that they're going to maybe find a way of attacking him. If it's me, I'm the Packers, I'm going to play 90% big nickel in this game. Meaning I'm going to take McDuffie off, and I'm going to play Javon Bullard in the slot. So Detroit, again, they're going to try to run it down the Packers' throats. They got to be ready to stop it. If Jared Goff throws 40 times in this game and beats you, fine. You tip your cap. You say, okay, we'll get you next time. Do not let Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery beat you. It's just that simple, right? So that's number 2. Key number 3, cover Amon-Ra St. Brown in the middle of the field. Cover, cover, cover. That's my key number 3. The biggest weakness on the Packers right now is their corners. Now, I think they're much better than Packer fans and even the media folks have said they are, to be clear, but they're still a weakness. They have not proven themselves. Carrington Valentine, I think he's going to have a big season. You guys heard me in the bold predictions. I think he's going to break out this season. He's going to lead the Packers in picks. Do not let the Lions eat up those corners. You got to get pressure. Make Jared Goff get the ball out quick. Don't give the Lions receivers time to beat them. That goes to St. Brown. He's probably one of the most underrated players in the whole league. We've seen him time and time again do damage against the Packers, except for last season when I started him in fantasy. LOL. The big issue now is you have an emerging Jamison Williams on the other side, who, in my opinion, can beat you deep anytime. So I think they have, they have an issue, right? They're going to have to make sure that duo doesn't beat you. They got they got Raymond in the slot. They got Isaac Tislaw as well. But the good news is the Packers have the second best safety duo in the league, in my opinion, to the Lions, in Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney. So again, those two I think will prevent Goff from throwing deep. I think the middle of the field is going to be where the Lions are going to try to eat. The layer between the linebackers and the safeties. I think that Hafley's going to make sure they don't beat him deep, but that's going to open up the void in the middle of the field more so than I think they're ready for. So they need to be really, really cautious at that. So again, the key for the Lions, they're going to try to get the ball out quick. They're going to run. They're going to play action the shit out of the Packers linebackers, and they're going to try to fit the ball in the middle of the field and that between the linebackers and safeties. If you can stop that, make him throw outside, make him throw deep against those safeties, I think you can win. But just do not let, Amon-Ra St. Brown keep dusting your corners and getting open in the middle of the field. Again, like I said earlier, if Jared Goff's dropped back 40 times in the game and beats you, tip your cap. If Jamison Williams beats you, Sam Laporta beats you, fine. Obviously not ideal, but I don't want Amon-Ra St. Brown beating them. That's the three keys. Now, the players to watch for the Packers before we wrap up here, Luke Musgrave. Again, I don't think we have talked about him near enough. I mentioned earlier how important it's going to be for the Packers to use play action and to run the ball. One of the best matchups in this game is really either tight end. I think Musgrave specifically on Alex Anzalone or putting them on Brian Branch, who's short and not super fast, by the way. He's a smart player. That's why he's so good. It's not because he's athletic. Musgrave specifically, I think they're going to design a few plays for him, maybe sneak him out of the backfield, leak him, get him on a linebacker and make him dust the linebacker because they're not going to be able to keep up with him. If you guys don't remember, Luke Musgrave ran 22 miles an hour at the Senior Bowl. He ran a 4.56 or something like that. He's very, very, very fast for a 6'6", 250-pound tight end. So do not be surprised here if he has a couple big catches in this game. Elton Jenkins, he did practice yesterday. I do think he's going to end up playing. But one thing to watch in this game is the rotation at left tackle with Jordan Morgan and Rasheed Walker. If Jenkins does not play for whatever reason, if things change and he doesn't play, we're going to see Sean Ryan slide to center, and Jordan Morgan's going to be the right guard. So I do think that regardless of where he plays, keep an eye on Jordan Morgan. I think that ultimately this season, if I had to predict, as much as I do like Rasheed Walker will not be on the team in 2026. He just won't. He's going to be too expensive. The Packers have already made clear they're not going to have a lot of money because they did the best thing they could do and sign Micah Parsons. So Jordan Morgan, we got to keep an eye on him. Dontavian Wicks, you guys know on this podcast, I've been talking a lot about how I think he's going to rebound this season, and he's going to be the Packers' number one receiver. I'm already backpedaling on this. I think it's going to be Matthew Golden in the end. LOL. But I do think Dontavian Wicks is, again, he's been sort of forgotten this offseason. He didn't really do a lot in camp. He had the hamstring injury. Hasn't practiced a lot in the first few weeks of camp, or the last few weeks. He's going to get some good matchups in this game. If he's on Amik Robertson or he's on that fourth corner for them, even if he's on a safety, I really like his chances of getting open. So I think he's going to be someone to watch too. Savion Williams, the third-round pick from this draft. This is our first full game look at Savion Williams. He's not on the injury report for the first time since camp started. We're going to see LaFleur do a couple design touches for him, get the ball in his hand. I'm going to predict this right now, guys. If you're listening to this and you're not like a super plugged-in fan and you don't know who Savion Williams is, I'm just going to predict it now. We're going to hear a lot of, who's 83? You're going to be watching this with your uncle who doesn't really follow them that close. And be like, damn, who's 83? Where'd they get 83? He's going to have a couple plays a game where we're just like, damn, that was sick. And I think he's going to do that in this game too. Get him isolated on a linebacker. My God, can you imagine? Get him behind the quarterback. Make him do the tush push, right? He did a little bit of quarterback wildcat stuff at TCU. Do that in this game. Next player, Devontae Wyatt. We talked about it earlier. All the buzz, rightfully so, around Micah Parsons. All the buzz, Kenny Clark leaving, and how are they going to stop the run? All this stuff, right? The forgotten player in the equation is Devontae Wyatt. I think he's going to eat against that interior. I think he's going to have a really, really big game in this one. He had a pretty quiet camp. We didn't really see him in the preseason, so I think, again, people are sort of forgetting about how good he can be. And it starts here in this game. He's going to have at least a sack, mark my words. Lastly, Carrington Valentine. I think Nate Hobbs is going to be out. If he practices today, this is Thursday the 4th, sorry. If he does practice today, I do think there's a chance he plays this weekend. Either way, Carrington Valentine is going to have a big role in this game. He's going to have to be tight. He's going to have to tackle. That's his biggest weakness. Make no mistake, guys. He has heard all the talk on Packers Twitter and from the national pundits about how the Packers needed to get a corner, or they need to bring Jair back, or they're going to be terrible, so on and so forth. Carrington Valentine's heard that, and he's going to be insanely motivated this season. It starts here. Honorable mention, the obvious, what's Micah Parsons going to do? I think he's going to be deployed in fun ways. I think it's going to be interesting to see where he lines up, how many snaps he's going to play, what kind of impact does he have individually, what kind of impact does he have on Gary and LVN and the other guys. Just seeing him out there on Sunday, guys, is going to be so fun. I can't wait. Now let's get into the final prediction. Now, before I give the prediction, I want to make a caveat. Every time I make predictions this year, it's coming from the heart. It's coming from my gut. I'm not just going to pick the Packers every week. I just am not going to do it because I don't want to be a homer. I want to actually be objective about this, right? Ultimately, I think the Lions take this first game here in week 1. I think the Lions are going to win. I think it's going to be really close. I think the Packers are going to look really good in the game. We're going to come away from this game regardless thinking, I feel really good about this team and how good they can be this season. Week 1, it's always fluky, right? And we've seen the Packers come out flat in week 1 before and then win 15 games, right? Or whatever, 14 games like they did in 2021. It happens, right? The big wild card here, and the one thing that nobody's talking about, is a lot of their key players, right, did not do a lot in training camp. Think about it. Jaden Reed, Xavier McKinney, Micah Parsons, Dontavian Wicks, Jordan Love hasn't practiced the last couple weeks, Rasheed Walker, Aaron Banks. There's a bunch more, right? These are key pieces to this team that did not play or practice in all of camp, right? They missed time. So I do think it's going to take a little bit of time here for them to warm up, right, and feel good. I want to add one more caveat. No matter what happens here, whether I'm wrong and the Packers win by 20 or it goes the other direction, the Lions win by 20, right? We cannot overreact in this game. What we're looking for in this game is moments and signs the team has made progress, right? They have a short turnaround time. After this game, they're going to play the Commanders a week from today, ironically, who, in my opinion, are a far inferior team than the Lions, despite the fact that they beat them. I think the Commanders are getting way too much hype. I think they're a 10-win team. I think they're a wildcard team, a fringe wildcard team. I actually think the Bears are better than the Commanders. Yeah, that's a hot take. I think they will have that 10-day break after that Commanders game. Regardless, come out of this game 1-1, this first 2 games. And then you go against the Browns. You have Micah Parsons fully go by then. Everyone's going to be a week healthier. I think the Packers are going to be fine either way. The final score prediction in this one, Detroit 23, the Packers 21. That's my prediction. The Lions will win it late. I think the Packers will have a lead late. The Lions will come down and score at the end. And that will be the game. I hope to God I'm wrong. I will never be happier than being wrong if the Packers beat the Lions in this game. As far as the schedule for the podcast goes, guys, I'm going to be doing 2 podcasts a week the entire season. One will be previewing the game. The other one will recap the game. Might do a third one here and there if there's a storyline to get to. The days I release the podcast will probably fluctuate a little bit depending on when I get time to do the show. Soon I'm going to start recording YouTube videos. As I record, I really would like to get the YouTube channel built up a little bit. I'm recording in my new house, my new office right now. That's exciting. So subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. Leave a 5-star review. Download the episodes. That helps to kind of see who's listening, right? How many people are listening. Tell your friends, tell your family. Send me your questions. I'd love to answer your questions. And I'll do that live on the show. Every time you guys get a question, I'm going to address it on the podcast every week, even if it's not part of the topic. I'll see you guys after the game. Like I said, hope your boy is wrong, and go Pack go. Have a good weekend, everybody.